A billionaire CEO publicly mocked a black teenager in front of 50 employees, daring him to fix a $15 million zero-cents machine that 7 PhDs and a NASA consultant had failed to repair. But what no one knew was that the farm boy had been waiting for this moment his entire life. And with one polite smile and a quiet text to his father, he ignited a chain reaction that would end a CEO's career, expose corporate racism, and rewrite the future of an entire industry. If that first line hit you like it hit me, don't scroll past this moment. Tap like. Share this story with someone who's been underestimated, overlooked, or outright humiliated. Because this isn't just about race or revenge. It's about a kid who turned dignity into strategy and silence into a plan. Stick around to the end, because what happens next is proof that true excellence never has to ask for permission. Marcus Thompson wasn't supposed to be there that day. He was 19, wearing jeans with faded knees and a hoodie that still smelled like engine oil. He came to TechFlow Industries to drop off a folder his mother forgot. Simple, in, out. But what started as a 5-minute errand spiraled into a public spectacle the second CEO, Richard Morrison, spotted him. "Hey, farm boy, how about you try fixing our $15 million zero-cents paperweight?" The words weren't casual. They were thrown like darts, designed to draw blood, and the laughter that followed didn't sound like humor. It sounded like a lynch mob with Wi-Fi. Marcus looked up slowly from his phone. He wasn't texting friends. He was typing a 4-word message to his father. "Dad, it's time. Start." 3 weeks. That's how long TechFlow's most advanced machine had been down. 3 weeks of bleeding money. $540,000 0 cents a day. Because no one could figure out why it stopped. Not the Harvard engineers, not the Germans they flew in, not even the NASA guy. Every fix failed. Every reboot stalled. Every solution crashed. But today, their entertainment came not from solving the problem, but mocking the farmer's kid with calloused hands and brown skin. Morrison strutted toward Marcus like a man who thought cruelty was charisma. "Come on, folks, make way for our rural expert. Maybe he'll use some cattle-wrangling technique our PhDs missed." Phones went up. Smirks stretched across faces. No one intervened, not even the ones who looked uncomfortable. Silence has always been racism's favorite co-conspirator. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't shrink. He didn't stutter or step back. He scanned the crowd, locking eyes with each face like he was filing names in his mental ledger. And then, for the first time, he smiled. Not the shy, nervous smile of a boy out of his league. It was the calm, calculated grin of someone who already knew how this would end. Because this wasn't an accident. It was a trap. And the CEO had just walked into it. Years ago, Marcus had watched this same man humiliate his father in public. Morrison laughed then, too, called him another mouthy mechanic, and crushed a proposal that could have changed a town. But the Thompsons don't forget. They build. Quietly, strategically, with blueprints and backup plans. "Of course, Mr. Morrison," Marcus replied, his voice so polite it sliced like glass. "It would be an honor to try to help." The room fell still. For a moment, even the laughter paused, unsure if they'd just witnessed submission or strategy. Morrison took it as weakness. He always did. He clapped Marcus on the back, whiskey breath thick in the air. "Let's see what a little farm boy can do with $1 million problem, huh?" And that's when Marcus slipped his phone back in his pocket, having just sent GPS coordinates and a code only 3 people in the world understood. To the untrained eye, he was just a kid with dirty boots, but to the people who knew what was coming next, Marcus Thompson wasn't just a somebody, he was the son of Daniel Thompson, the reclusive genius who had designed that very machine under a contract Morrison had buried. And now? Now that machine was the match. Marcus was the spark, and Morrison, drunk on his own ego, had just struck it on live company Wi-Fi. If you're still with me, you already know this story isn't just revenge, it's revelation. It's what happens when people mistake humility for helplessness. So before we go deeper into what Marcus did next, I need you to do something bold. Share this video right now. Comment if you've ever had your dignity mocked by someone too small to recognize your brilliance. And subscribe, because the next chapter is where the screwdriver meets the silence, and the empire starts to crack. Marcus walked toward the machine like it was an old friend, not some mechanical riddle that had beaten the world's finest minds. The crowd didn't know what to make of it. Morrison was still chuckling, but the laughter in the room had thinned. People were starting to sense something was off. The way Marcus ignored the comments, the way he didn't even glance at the massive control panel, yet moved with the precision of someone who'd built it bolt by bolt. "Does anyone have a Phillips screwdriver and a flashlight?" he asked. Calm, collected, not a trace of nerves. Morrison laughed again, louder this time, trying to hold the room. "You hear that? He wants tools. Maybe next he'll ask for a hammer and a prayer." But the joke didn't land. A few nervous chuckles, mostly silence, and then a quiet shift. Dr. Sarah Chun, head of engineering, stepped forward and handed Marcus the tools without a word. "Thank you, Doctor," Marcus said softly, meeting her eyes. "You designed the cooling system, right? It's elegant. I've never seen airflow redirected that efficiently in a compact chassis." Sarah froze. That information wasn't public. It wasn't even on internal documentation. Only 4 people in the entire company knew that design. She looked at Marcus again, really looked at him, not as a kid, not as a janitor's son or a secretary's boy, but as someone who clearly didn't belong in a box. "Who are you?" she whispered. Marcus just smiled, already on his knees, unscrewing the lower panel. His phone buzzed in his pocket. One glance, coordinates received, starting Phoenix protocol. DT. Behind him, Morrison was losing grip. He didn't understand why the jokes weren't hitting, why eyes were shifting from him to the boy with the tools. "This is going to be good," he shouted, stepping closer. "Watch him try to fix this thing with a farm trick. Someone film this. Let's go viral." But the tension had turned. No one was sure anymore who was the punchline and who was the punch. Marcus removed 3 panels, with a grace that didn't belong to a teenager guessing. He traced a bundle of wires, paused, then muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "European pressure parameters on an American voltage grid. Classic mismatch. Surprised no one caught that." Sarah blinked hard. That was the exact theory her team had been chasing for 3 weeks. Not even confirmed yet. How could this young man know? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small adapter, one Sarah immediately recognized as a custom-built voltage regulator not available on any commercial shelf. He connected it with smooth efficiency. The machine hummed, then clicked, then whirred. Lights blinked. Status bars lit up in sequence. The floor went silent except for the sound of the $15 million 0-cents beasts waking up like it had just been sleeping, not broken. People leaned in, phones lowered, jaws opened slightly. It wasn't just working. It was operating beyond baseline. A system miracle wrapped in farm boy skin. Morrison pushed forward, eyes wild. "You cheated! You had help! That's not possible!" But Marcus was already standing, calm, dusting off his palms like he'd just planted tomatoes. "Cheating?" he asked, his voice still that same polite edge. "The issue was a voltage incompatibility. Any technician with basic training should have checked that first." He didn't say it with malice. He didn't need to. The truth did the cutting for him. Morrison's face reddened. He stepped closer again, this time with something darker in his tone. "When you fail again, I'll make sure your mother loses her job. A family of incompetents doesn't belong here." And just like that, he touched the only nerve that still pulsed beneath Marcus's calm. Marcus's fingers twitched, just once, but when he lifted his face, the smile was still there, only now it had teeth. "Mr. Morrison," he said slowly, every syllable wrapped in warning, "are you sure you want to bet the company's reputation at this point?" Morrison laughed again, but it cracked on the edges. "You nobody. You can't threaten me." At that exact moment, Marcus's phone vibrated. One line arriving in 20 minutes, repair the ground. The second half of the plan was already in motion. Marcus turned back to the machine, adjusted 2 cables, and locked the panel back into place. He glanced at Sarah. "Do you believe people should be judged by their skills, not their skin?" She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "Then stay close. You're about to see what happens when prejudice underestimates preparation." Because this wasn't just about proving himself. It wasn't just about his mom's job, or a machine, or even a viral moment. This was about a system, a pattern, a poison that had gone unchecked too long, and the antidote was already on its way in a black car heading for the warehouse. Marcus had lit the fuse. Morrison just hadn't seen the smoke yet. If you're still with me, then you feel it. The shift, the rising heat, the calm before something that can't be undone. Don't look away now. Share this story if you've ever seen brilliance mocked because it didn't look the way power expected. Comment if you've ever been told you didn't belong in a room you ended up owning. And subscribe now, because in the next part, the man who built the machine is coming, and the CEO who mocked his son is about to choke on the contract he forgot he signed. Marcus stood quietly next to the humming machine, arms crossed, eyes steady, while the room around him buzzed with disbelief. The same machine that had humiliated engineers, drained $500,000 a day, and nearly triggered a shutdown, was now purring like a satisfied cat. Morrison, still clinging to his crumbling performance, stepped forward with forced bravado. "This doesn't prove anything. It was a fluke. You had help. Tools from someone on the inside." But even he could hear the fear behind his voice. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't on his side. Some were recording with a new purpose now, not to mock Marcus, but to witness what was clearly something bigger than a lucky guess. And Morrison, in all his arrogance, hadn't yet realized he'd walked into his own reckoning, with cameras still rolling. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't defend. He didn't explain. He simply adjusted the custom adapter, wiped his palms, and checked his phone. The second ping had arrived, a timestamp, a destination, a countdown, 15 minutes. That's all he needed. "Dr. Chun," he said, turning to Sarah with an air of casual command. "You worked with the European schematics, correct?" She nodded, still dazed. "I assume you also noticed the frequency mismatches were interfering with the cooling sink." Her eyes widened. "We suspected it, but hadn't confirmed yet." Marcus gave a slight nod. "It's confirmed now." Morrison opened his mouth, ready to toss another insult, but hesitated. Something in Marcus's calm had shifted. He wasn't just responding. He was leading. And for the first time in his career, Richard Morrison didn't know how to follow a conversation where he wasn't the smartest man in the room. What no one around them knew, not yet, was that 3 years earlier, in a sealed office with no cameras and a confidentiality agreement thicker than a legal Bible, Morrison had personally signed off on the blueprint for this machine. Not to develop it, to borrow it, illegally. The mind behind the design had been a reclusive engineer with one condition. His identity must remain confidential and his work uncredited. Morrison agreed, took the tech, and used it to catapult his company's market value. Until today, when the son of that silent engineer walked into the warehouse and pulled the truth straight out of steel and wire. Marcus's success wasn't a lucky break. It was the playbook being run in reverse. Quietly, patiently, with precision. Then came the shift no one expected. The warehouse entrance slid open with a sharp, deliberate clatter. Heads turned, phones rose, and into the silence stepped a tall, composed black man in a charcoal suit, his presence commanding without saying a word. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a look of generational resolve in the other. "Excuse the interruption," he said with slow, deliberate force. "I'm Daniel Thompson, and I believe you've been testing my son." Morrison's lips parted, then froze. Sarah dropped the wrench in her hand. A dozen employees gasped, and the rest instinctively stepped back. The energy in the room flipped like a circuit breaker. Marcus stood straighter. The wait was over. Morrison blinked like he didn't understand the words. Testing, he stammered. You never said you were a farmer? Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I am a farmer, but I'm also the engineer who designed this machine for TechFlow Industries under a contract you signed and then buried. He opened the briefcase, pulled out a folder, and held up a tablet. This video was recorded March 14th, 2021. It shows you hiring me to work in secrecy. You promised full compensation, full credit, then violated both. On the screen, a younger Morrison smiled and shook Daniel's hand, outlined parameters, and signed his name beside a non-disclosure clause in high resolution. There was no denying it. This wasn't hearsay, it was history with receipt. Morrison's mouth opened again, but Marcus was already raising his phone. We also have today's events recorded. All of it. The slurs, the threats, the humiliation, live-streamed on the company's own Wi-Fi. Hashtags are trending already. Racist CEO, TechFlow racism. He turned the screen so Morrison could see. 50,000 views, climbing by the second. Comments flooding in like a tidal wave of rage. Morrison looked around for support, but even his executive team was inching away from him. They knew what was happening. The fall had begun. And Marcus, the boy they laughed at, the little farmer, was holding the microphone now. This is what poetic justice looks like, not with screaming or shouting, but with truth, deployed like a scalpel. Morrison had spent years building a brand off stolen brilliance, and in less than an hour that foundation cracked, because the people he thought didn't matter never stopped watching, and waiting, and documenting. If you've ever been silenced, laughed at, or told you don't belong, this part is for you. Share this story now. Send it to someone who needs to know that dignity isn't weakness. It's fuel. Tap like if you've ever seen someone underestimated turn the whole room upside down. And subscribe, because in the next part, Morrison's collapse isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a revolution that will change the industry and rewrite who gets to lead it. The silence in the warehouse was the kind that makes clocks tick louder. Morrison's smirk had vanished. His hands hovered near his belt like he was searching for a remote control that would reset the moment. But no remote could fix this. No sarcasm, no pivot, no publicist. Just a father, a son, and the truth, backed by timestamps, contracts, and a machine that no longer bowed to his authority. Daniel Thompson placed the folder on the nearest workstation with a surgeon's calm. Inside, signed documents, technical blueprints, and a confidentiality agreement with Morrison's name all over it. I believe these outline the terms you violated, Daniel said, his voice steady. You made two mistakes, Mr. Morrison. You stole my design, and then you mocked my blood. Sarah Chun stood frozen beside the revived machine, her eyes darting between Marcus and Daniel. Wait, you're DT? She asked, her voice almost breaking. The DT from the master specs? The one whose designs we reverse-engineered? Daniel turned, nodded. I've read your work too, Dr. Chun. Your analysis on turbine efficiency was excellent. You were one of the few people here who almost caught the flaw. Her face turned crimson. It wasn't flattery, it was recognition from the real architect. Morrison, desperate now, leaned forward and hissed, This doesn't need to go public. No one needs to know those details. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Too late. 50,000 people are watching the video we streamed. You're trending across 4 platforms. Try racist CEO. I think you're number 3 in the country. That's when Morrison's phone rang. He stepped back, hands trembling, voice cracking as he answered. Yes, this is Richard. No, I didn't. Listen, I can explain. But whatever he heard on the other end cut through his last thread of control. He paled, then nodded, then hung up. Without saying a word, he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a half-empty bottle of the same $3,000 0 Irish whiskey he reeked of earlier, and took a long, desperate swig. The king had fallen. Not with a gunshot or a scandal, but with truth, filmed in real time, delivered by the people he once called invisible. Around him, whispers turned to outright conversation. Employees who had been silent were now openly texting, forwarding links, screenshotting comments. His power was crumbling not from the top, but from beneath his feet. Daniel watched Morrison carefully, not with vengeance, but clarity. "You see, Richard," he said, folding his hands behind his back, "you didn't just violate a contract. You miscalculated the one thing men like you always misjudge: legacy. You thought because we were quiet, we were weak. You thought because we didn't threaten, we weren't preparing. But what you failed to understand is that some people don't fight you in courtrooms or boardrooms. They wait until the world's watching, and then they redefine what justice looks like." Morrison laughed once, dry, bitter. "So what now? You want money, a press release, an apology tour?" Marcus stepped in, his tone as sharp as a scalpel. "We don't want your money. We want your access revoked, your influence dismantled, and your name tied forever to the kind of leadership that gets dragged into daylight and doesn't survive the sun." And that's exactly what happened. Over the next 10 minutes, the legal team, alerted by the viral video and the board's emergency call, arrived with documents in hand. Richard Morrison's termination was immediate and absolute. His company credit card was frozen, his system access revoked. A security officer escorted him out the back door as employees quietly stepped aside. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't say goodbye, he just walked into the parking lot, where his company car had already been reprogrammed to deny him entry. A cardboard box with his belongings was later dropped off by a courier. Meanwhile, Marcus stood at the heart of the warehouse, surrounded by stunned co-workers, his hands still stained with machine grease, but now holding more power than any degree ever granted. If you've ever questioned whether dignity and discipline could beat the system, this is your proof, because what Marcus and Daniel did wasn't revenge, it was reform. They didn't scream, they engineered. They waited, they prepared, and when the moment came, they made sure every second was recorded, every signature preserved, every insult captured in high-definition karma. This wasn't a scandal, it was a signal to every leader who's built a throne from stolen labor and false credit. Your time is running out. So if you've ever been dismissed, disrespected, or doubted, share this now. If you've ever held your tongue and wondered if silence would ever speak for you, like this story. And subscribe, because the next part is where the fallout becomes foundation. And Marcus Thompson? He's about to become more than just the boy who fixed the machine. He's about to rebuild the very system that tried to keep him out. Morrison was gone, but his shadow lingered like a bad smell in the break room. The warehouse floor, once thick with fear and fake laughs, felt different now, like the walls themselves had witnessed something they couldn't unsee. Employees whispered not about the machine anymore, but about Marcus, about Daniel. About what had been built in secret while the CEO mocked with his mouth wide open and his eyes completely shut. And as the board scrambled behind closed doors to contain the fallout, another door quietly opened. The door Marcus had unlocked with more than just technical skill. He had turned the company inside out, using truth as a tool. And now the people who once recorded him for laughs were looking to him for leadership. That's the quiet twist of justice. It doesn't beg for attention. It becomes impossible to ignore. Back at the Thompson family farm, Daniel and Marcus sat at the same kitchen table where the blueprint for the machine had been drawn years ago. The sun leaked through the window, but neither of them looked at it. They were staring at a laptop screen, watching the number on Marcus's video climb past 1 million views. Hashtags were now news headlines. TechFlow boycott was trending. Thousands of users were tagging corporations, demanding accountability, and then the call came. Marcus picked up, expecting an apology. Instead, it was Linda Roberts, the new interim CEO. She didn't mince words. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "we would like to offer you a position as senior engineer. Full benefits, starting salary, $120,000, 0 cents. We're also offering a full scholarship for your education at Stanford." Marcus blinked, then looked at his dad. The man didn't say a word, just nodded once. That was all Marcus needed. But Daniel had his own question. What about the breach of contract, the stolen credits? Linda hesitated, then replied, "We're preparing compensation. $2,500,000, 0 cents for the design theft, plus retroactive royalties for every product derived from your work. That wasn't all. We also want to launch a diversity program in your family's name," she added. "Funded annually at $500,000, 0 cents. Training, scholarships, mentorships. A full initiative." For a moment, no one said anything. Because sometimes silence isn't empty. It's full of the sound of an empire trying to rebuild what it burned. And this time, the people leading the rebuild looked like the ones it once tried to erase. That Friday, Sarah Chun arrived at the farm, not with flowers or scripted apologies, but with paperwork. She handed Marcus an official proposal bearing Tetflow's letterhead. "We want to establish the Daniel Thompson Institute for Innovation," she said, "to honor the genius your father gave away anonymously for far too long." She looked at Marcus, her voice breaking slightly. "And I want you to run it. As our ambassador, we need someone who knows both brilliance and bias." Helena Thompson, standing in the doorway, could barely hold back tears. After 15 years of working silently in the background, being overlooked, underestimated, and passed by for promotions, she was now watching her son and husband take back the narrative, with the entire industry watching. Meanwhile, Morrison was discovering what happens when the market finally sees who you really are. His former colleagues ghosted him. His consulting prospects dried up overnight. One viral video had revealed the rot, and no amount of spin could cover the stench. Even the brands he once courted were now publicly distancing themselves. His name, once a golden ticket, had become a career-killing curse. And the most ironic part? He hadn't just lost his job. He had lost his utility. In a world that now valued inclusion, innovation, and transparency, Morrison was nothing but an expensive relic of how not to lead. He had built a fortune pretending to be the smartest man in the room, only to be outmaneuvered by the very people he mocked for sport. And this is where it matters most, because what happened to Morrison wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. For every underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued person out there, this was the revenge of preparation, the triumph of competence over charisma, of kindness over cruelty. Marcus didn't yell. Daniel didn't sue first. Helena didn't beg for recognition. They simply waited. And when the time was right, they let the facts speak louder than the lies. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who thought power gave them the right to define you, this part is yours. So share it. Tag someone who needs to be reminded that the best comeback isn't rage, it's results. Like this story if you believe that systems can be redesigned by the very people they try to shut out. And subscribe, because the final part isn't about fallout. It's about building a legacy that turns humiliation into hope and hope into history. Marcus isn't just the boy who fixed a broken machine, he's the man helping rebuild an industry, and this time he's got blueprints that can't be stolen. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson walked across the Stanford campus, not as a visitor, not as a curiosity, but as a full scholarship student and respected industry voice. His name now carried weight in rooms that used to laugh at names like his. He wasn't the kid who fixed a machine anymore. He was the face of a movement. At the same time, Daniel Thompson, once dismissed as a rural oddity, was consulting for 3 of the country's largest tech firms, each paying more per project than Richard Morrison had earned in an entire year. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the quiet dismantling of a myth that brilliance had to come packaged in pedigree, whiteness, or polished arrogance. That lie had been shattered in full view of the world, and no one wanted to go back. Back at TechFlow Industries, transformation wasn't just cosmetic. The new leadership honored its deal with the Thompsons and pushed forward the most aggressive diversity expansion plan in its history. 50 new engineers were hired from underserved communities, 3 new patents were filed, each developed by teams led by young minds who, just a year earlier, would have never even landed an interview. The company's valuation jumped 40%. Wall Street didn't care how the innovation looked, just that it worked better than anything before it. But inside those boardrooms, people knew. They whispered about the Thompson effect, a term born not from metrics, but from moral momentum. For once, equity wasn't just ethical, it was profitable. And everyone was paying attention. And while Marcus was redefining what leadership looked like, Morrison was struggling to find a place to hide. He'd relocated to a rural town, thinking anonymity might shield him, but even there, a simple Google search tied his name to a scandal taught in business ethics classes. No job offers, no partnerships, no invitations. He started a consulting firm, only to watch potential clients back out mid-process. The man who once laughed at a teenager for wearing work boots was now walking in worn-out shoes himself, locked out of the empire he built with other people's labor. Every insult, every smirk, every dismissal, it had become digital fossil fuel, powering the very downfall he swore would never come. That's the price of arrogance in the information age. Receipts don't burn. But the most unexpected twist came not from a paycheck or a headline. It came from a documentary, Racial Humiliation, The Price of Corporate Arrogance, a 45-minute exposé released online by a small group of independent creators. It hit 15 million views in 1 month. But it wasn't just the views, it was what followed. Letters from young Black and Latino kids who said they'd never considered engineering until they saw Marcus on screen. Parents thanking the Thompsons for reminding them that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the pause before the precision. Universities requesting guest lectures, mentorship programs erupting overnight. And Marcus? He never chased the spotlight. He just built the kind of story no one could ignore. He didn't just go viral, he went vital. In one podcast interview, Marcus was asked what revenge felt like. He paused, then smiled. True revenge, he said, is building something so meaningful that your enemy's opinion becomes irrelevant. You don't need to destroy them. You just need to make sure the truth outlives their lies. His words circled the internet for weeks, printed on posters, quoted in classrooms, and Daniel, sitting beside him, added one final note. I taught my son that talent has no color, no zip code, no accent. But I've also learned sometimes the world needs to see that truth in broad daylight, with the volume all the way up. And that's exactly what they did. Helena Thompson, once the silent secretary with brilliance hidden in her genes, now walked through the halls of TechFlow with her head high, not because she needed to prove anything, but because her silence had paid off. She had protected her son's path until he was ready to light it on fire. Her story, once quiet, was now part of a company-wide onboarding training on humility, inclusion, and what happens when you bet against the right people. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated, written off because of where you came from, how you looked, who your parents were or weren't? If you have, this story is your blueprint. You don't always have to shout. Sometimes you just need to build something too big to be ignored. Share your story in the comments, and if Marcus's journey lit a fire in you, share this video. Like it if you believe that legacy isn't given, he's claimed. And subscribe, because we're not done telling the truth. We're just getting started.